إنا كنا مرسلين رحمة من ربك إنه هو السميع العليم رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إن كنتم موقنين لا إله إلا هو يحيي ويميت ربكم ورب آبائكم الأولين بل هم في شك يلعبون فارتقب يوم تأتي السماء بدخان مبين يغشى الناس هذا عذاب أليم ربنا اكشف عنا العذاب إنا مؤمنون صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, brother Froz. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, as-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulillah. Jazakallah for those that are here today. I think our attendance for the halaqah is getting lower and lower as the summer approaches, but inshallah it should hopefully improve once Ramadan is coming. But we need to be here, we need to try and get the people that are out there enjoying the weather, etc., to come and benefit from these talks that are coming over the next few weeks and for the preparation of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, today we're going to start off with the topic of Sha'ban, sowing the seeds. We've got Dr. Riza Mohammed, who's been here before. For those that were here during the Seerah series back in January, just to quickly introduce Dr. Riza, he's a teacher and executive member of the European Academy of Quranic Sciences in Manchester. He has studied traditional Islamic sciences under leading scholars in the Caribbean, Southeast Asia and the Middle East. He's lectured extensively on the subject of spiritual and self-development. I think he's come straight from teaching as well today. I think he does that on Saturday. So Jazakallah khair anyway for Dr. Izzat for joining us, and I'll pass on to him.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil kareem. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala abdika wa rasulika Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. It's a pleasure again to be here in Neely Mosque to talk about an important subject, about us trying to sow the seeds in preparation for the month of Ramadan. And what we're doing here is in keeping with what the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to do during this time of the year. That the months of Rajab, the month of Sha'ban and the month of Ramadan are three important months. And the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he used to make extensive dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the month of Rajab and the month of Sha'ban and the month of Ramadan, and to enable us to be able to maximize the rewards from these 3 months. so that when we look at the month of Rajab, in a sense, we are trying to lay the seeds in terms of trying to prepare for the month of Ramadan. And then in Sha'ban, we are just trying to refine things, and then we're hoping to reap the crop of our efforts in the month of Ramadan, inshallah. So today, there will be 4 lectures, inshallah, over the next 4 weeks. And the purpose of today's talk is really to lay the foundation by which we will be able to slowly understand and also reflect upon how it is that we can maximize from the rewards of the month of Ramadan. And what I have thought about in preparation for this particular presentation is for us to look at a number of things. And the first one is to really consider, is there a need for such a program? Is there a need for us to consider preparing ourselves for the month, or shall we just plunge ourselves into it? I'm sure many would feel that we have fasted for many years previously. We have experienced many previous months of Ramadan, so this month should be no different. And therefore, when it comes, it comes. When this moon is sighted, then we begin to fast, and when it's sighted again, then we end the fast, and that's the end of the month of Ramadan. But as we know that most of us are involved in fields, we know how to be able to maximize in terms of preparation for something which is better. If it is that you were a student, you don't just go into an examination hoping to get the maximum mark at the end of it. The way that you would approach the subject that you study is that you would ensure that you're properly prepared, that you understand what are these subjects that might be coming. You make sure that your knowledge is at the appropriate level, that you have optimum, your technique is right. Everything, you try to make sure that everything is ready, so that when in fact you do take the examination, then you will be able to get the maximum mark. And so too is the same in the month of Ramadan. The month of Ramadan, inshallah, in a little bit over a month time will come. But as the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, not everyone will get the same reward. Everyone will fast. Everyone may perform the Salat al-Taraweeh, but not everyone will get the same reward. There will be some that the month of Ramadan will come with all of its barakah, and who will be able to grasp a lot of reward, and there will be others who will be able to grasp very little of it, by having the dissatisfaction of undergoing hunger and thirst. So it is something important for us to consider. And the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during this month of Ramadan, he used to do so much to be able to prepare himself for the month. If we were to look back at the month of Rajab and even the month of Sha'ban, the month of Sha'ban, even before the institution of fasting during this month, it was a month in which the Arabs at that time, before the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they used to use this particular month to be able to go and search for water. Imagine having to live through the month of Ramadan, which in itself means a month which is very hot. So if it is very hot, it means that you have to prepare yourself. It means you have to have adequate shelter, you must have food, you must have water. And so in the past, they used to use this month of Sha'ban to prepare themselves, to make sure that they had adequate supplies, so that when the month of Ramadan comes, then they will be able to deal with it in a better manner. They will be prepared for it. And so too is the same for us. But obviously, at that time, they were looking at us basically at how to physically, overcome the obstacles in this month. Now we are looking at something which is beyond that, which is the month of the Quran itself. Now when we think about what we can achieve over the month of Ramadan, the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to talk about the month of Ramadan as a month month for himself, in the sense that it is a month for salutation and peace upon Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And therefore it becomes a month by which you will be able to connect with the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, And in the month of Ramadan, you connect with the Quran, because we know that so much time is spent with the Quran during the month of Ramadan. And then it's a month for the Ummah as well, because it's a month for us to be able to meet, for be able to socialize with each other, and at the same time it is a month for us to be able to grow and develop our Iman. So when it comes to the idea of fasting, there are a number of things I want us to consider, inshallah. And the very first one is that I think that there needs to be a change in what I would call our mindset, a change in mindset when it comes to what we consider to be Ramadan is all about. In that, even though we fast and we do so, we know exactly when we should do it each year, for many who celebrate occasions, it becomes a form of celebration. It becomes something that they do as because they just do it. Why do you fast? Because I fast every year. That's something that we do as Muslims. But it's a change in mindset where it's not just looked at some sort of fashionable, ceremonial ritual that you go through, but it's much more than that. And when I mean much more than that, there is something which is called a means towards an end. And we need to understand and appreciate that the end of everything that we do in this life is a means towards an end. It's a means. So what do I mean by that? I mean that, for instance, we've just performed Salat al-Asr. But in performing Salat al-Asr, that's not an end in itself. You can't say that, at the end of Salat al-Asr, yes, I've achieved my goal. Salat al-Asr was meant to achieve something else. And it's a bigger question that has to be asked, that has to be answered. And the same has to do with when you fast in the month of Ramadan. At the end of the month of Ramadan, you do not just look back at the month and say that I have fasted 30 days. That's not the end. That's a means towards an end. And this is why when the Quran talks about the idea of fasting, it says that يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Which means that the sole purpose, the end purpose of what month of Ramadan and fasting is all about, it is about trying to develop within yourself that sense of God consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that becomes what I would call a form of measurement for us. It means that now we have some sort of monitor, a scale by which we can use, that we can judge our performance. Not just our performance at the end of the 30 days, but our performance on every particular opportunity, at the end of each day, at the end of each hour, as you fast during the month of Ramadan. So it becomes a means, and then you have to ask yourself now, is that means which is there, is that something which is bringing me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is it something which is neutral, or sometimes something which is taken away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In other words, is it being used in the correct way? Is it being understood in the correct way? And is it being used in the correct way? Once we begin to appreciate that things are a means towards an end, it means that we will look at the institution of zakah in a different way, the institution of if you go for hajj in a different way, if you do whatever, if you make a dhikr, if it is that you give sadaqah, whatever it is that you do, you make tawbah, whatever it is that you do, it's a means towards an end. There are many people, for instance, when they think about the prayer, they think about, it's going to give me so much reward on Yawm al-Qiyamah. In Jannah I will get maybe this amount of thawab because I have performed the prayer. But the reward is not what it's all about. It's not about how much reward that you're going to get. It's about how closer you're coming to Allah, and in so doing, how much it is transforming you. Because to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the prayer is not what's going to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the prayer which is used as a form of purification is what is going to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants a heart and a mind which is pure, which is purified, which is one filled with ikhlas. So if it is that you're not pure, how can you become closer to Allah? So this is what it is. It's not the prayer that is doing it. The prayer is enabling you, helping you to be able to do so. So if it is that we were to look now at fasting in the same light, we realize that it's not just the abstention from food and drink and some other things that is going to keep us away, going to bring us closer to Allah. But by doing so, by abstaining from some of these things, it is going to provide an environment and a mental atmosphere by which we will be able to relieve ourselves of other types of distractions and being able to focus, build our sense of focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once we become refocused, then we begin to realize about the things which are most important to us, which are really important to us, which we have taken for granted. And by doing so, then we begin to communicate in a much better fashion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He becomes closer to us in a sense. And as you become closer to Him, then you begin to change. Then you begin to connect. And as you connect, then your iman begins to grow. And this is what it's all about. So what did the Rasul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did Rasul Allah do during this month of Sha'ban, which is coming inshallah? I think, is it the 2nd of July? 2nd of July, the beginning of the month of Sha'ban? Started, isn't it?
Yes,
started already. So it started already, and this is important for us. Because we know if we call ourselves believers, of course we'll be looking at Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as uswa, isn't it? He is our example. He is the one that we want to emulate. And the first thing that we will notice is that he will look at this month of Sha'ban very differently as he will look at other months of the year. His attitude will change. And one of the things that he is trying to do during this month of Sha'ban, he is trying to break the cycle of habit. Breaking the cycle of habit. And this is what fasting is all about. You see, during the course of the year, we develop a certain sense of habit. So we do most things almost absent-mindedly. Sometimes sometimes I reach to work in the morning after driving maybe 10-15 miles, and I'm surprised that I've actually in the car park at work, because I didn't realize that I thought I just left at home. And it's almost as if we operate an autopilot at times, isn't it? We just do things and suddenly it's there. The day goes by and suddenly we realize it's 5 o'clock, it's time to go back home. Sometimes it even happens to us in our prayer. We say Allahu Akbar and we didn't realize that we've just said Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and the prayer is all over. And sometimes, you can test yourself, and a little test, after Salat al-Maghrib, which you'll perform in a couple of hours' time, just ask us, after you perform your sunnah, ask yourself a simple question. What surahs did the Imam recite in the first two rak'ah? Or just ask yourself, what surah did I just recite in the sunnah? And you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. And I've tried it. You'll be surprised how often you will not know. You will not know what surahs of the Quran that you yourself have recited, or what surahs the Imam have recited. And part of the reason for this is because we're almost operating on an automatic pilot. Things just happen. And as things happen like that, what happens is that time is going. Time is going. And as time goes by, it means that we are not really close to reflecting on what is happening. And so our productivity level drops. Or we think that we're productive, but we could be far more productive. But there is no sense of alertness in what we do. So to break this cycle of habit, the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one most important thing that he used to do during this month of Sha'ban is that he used to fast even more. He used to fast even more. So he would begin that process of fasting. And we know of one thing of the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which was that he would look for any excuse to be able to indulge in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any excuse that possible that he can find. It could be that the rain is about to fall. You know, he would go and make a dua and he would perform 2 rak'ah salah. Maybe there's too much rain falling and they want cessation from that. Then he would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be engaged in prayer. Whatever the occasion, it could be an eclipse, it could be something else. It could be that he is in need of something, it could be that he has to make a dua for someone else, whatever it is. But he's looking for an opportunity and looking for an avenue, by something by which he will be able to gain an extra reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that will become closer to him. And for us it's the same. And for him in the month of Sha'ban, it used to be a month where he would start fasting even more. He would start fasting even more. And the other thing is that he would say that during this month of Sha'ban, there's also a time when the fate of all human beings are decided. You know, those people who will pass away over the forthcoming year, that there may be a time when that is decided. And that why not, when that fate has been decided, to be able to be decided in a fasting state. We know that when it comes to the whole question of time, that time is not something which is equivalent in value. It's not equivalent in value. Even though you may have 24 hours of the day, there are some periods of time which are far more important than other periods of time. And for us as Muslims, we know that there's a time. The time of Salatul Fajr is far more important than some other times of the time of Salatul Fajr, the time of Salatul Asr, are the times in which the angels are transitioning. The angels that are on your sides, that they are returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be replaced by new angels on your right and on your left. And if it is that you engaged in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at those times, then it means that the last thing that the angel has recorded is something which is positive. It is a good deed from Allah. And that's the last thing you want in your record book, isn't it? If a report has to be written for each one of us, what's the last statement that we want put down in that record book about our character, our behavior, of who we are? Isn't it something which is noteworthy? Something we can say, yes, this is the last thing. I found my servant in his worship. I found my servant in making tawbah. I found my servant making dua. I found my servant in some other form of ibadah, some other form of worship. So this is a time these are times which are more important. Even if we were to consider the time just before Salat al-Fajr, which is the last period of the night, we know it is a time in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that he descends. He descends, not that he physically descends, but he descends to be able to show to us how close he's becoming to us, that he's close to his servants, such that if it is that they are making a dua to him, he's ready to accept their requests. If it is that they are seeking his mercy and his forgiveness, he's ready to grant them whatever it is that they ask for, of his mercy and of his forgiveness. So this is a special time. It is perhaps the most important time. During the month of Ramadan, we've all been engaged in trying to seek out the night of Laylatul Qadr, isn't it? Everybody talks about Laylatul Qadr. And we'll all be here in the mosque, praying, extra tarawih, making extra dua, trying to stay up for the whole night, hoping that the night that we thought will be, inshallah, the night of Laylatul Qadr, which will be that night. But that's a special night, and it's a great night, a night that has a reward much more than even 1,000 months of other times of the year. But the same type of reward that is granted on that night is the reward which is granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every single day of the year. Yet we only recognize that there is immense reward to be given by Allah once per year, looking for that night, which we may not even experience. But that type of reward is there from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's there for us to be able to grasp and for us to be able to take. So knowing that there are special times is important for us. And so too, when it comes to fasting, the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to fast. We know that we have to fast in the month of Ramadan. Yes, it is fard. But he used to utilize the month of Sha'ban to fast as much as he can. fasting on Mondays and Thursdays, fasting on the 13th, 14th and 15th, and fasting on other days of the month. Some things he would fast as much as he can during this month. And this is something for us to be able to engage in, inshallah. The next thing, it is said that this is the month by which we should also be able to be engaged in making salawat to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as much as we can. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. That we should be able to continuously sending salams upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the question becomes this, and I want us to consider it, is what exactly does it mean to send salawat to the Prophet? Is it simply sitting in a corner and saying, sending salams? Or is it much more than that? I believe that when we talk about trying to make this month a month of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it means a month trying to be able to engage in Sunnah and in the Seerah and trying to understand him. We've just been able to, in the month of, in the last month, we were celebrating the Isra and the Mi'raj. But in this month, it's also an opportunity for us to be able to engage in truly trying to understand the seerah of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and especially Sunnah, and trying to emulate it and make it part of our lives, to learn as much as we can. And not only much as we can in terms of everything else, but also much so in terms of the fasting, of the Sunnah of Ramadan, so that we can better be able to follow in his footsteps what we do in the month of Ramadan, inshallah. One of the things that we need to do as part of our training program, and all of us are young, but if we look back at the last year, and I want each one of us to think about what we've done over the last year, I want us to ask ourselves a simple question. And that question is, how much time did we spend trying to study the life history of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I know we had a program here, was it in January? We were looking at the seerah. And this is something important, but being able to do it on a regular basis, to study the seerah and study the sunnah and the books of hadith. For instance, to take a simple book of hadith, it could be maybe a small one like Imam al-Nawawi's 40 hadith, and being able to study it in some detail, or be able to take a book like, for instance, a bigger book like Riyadh al-Salihin, which is a very good collection of hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, which deals especially with rules of akhlaq, of behavior, of good conduct, of spirituality, of things that we can do to reform our character. This is what Riyadh al-Salihin collection has to do with. But taking a book of hadith, and even if we decided, well, look, we'll just take maybe Riyadh al-Salihin on its own, and over the next 20, 30 days of this month, try and see if it is that we can cover it from cover to cover, all of the hadith, and try and see if it is that we can understand the meaning and the lessons to be learned from them. This is something that we need to adopt in addition to fasting. The last thing I wanted to talk about is that we know that the month of Ramadan is the month of the Quran, and we will be dealing with this in much more detail towards some of the other lectures, inshallah. But knowing that the month of Ramadan is the month of Quran, very often what happens is that we divide the month of Ramadan into 30 days, and then we look at trying to complete one juz of the Quran each day, and hoping that we will complete the entire Quran, the khatam of Quran at the end of the month. And this is good. But rarely have we prepared ourselves for it. Have we prepared ourselves for this, this type of practice? And one of the important things to remember is that the Quran should not just be read and studied during the month of the Ramadan only, but it has to be read and studied in every other month. And don't just wait for the month of Ramadan to arrive, first of the month of Ramadan, and then start reading the Quran or studying the Quran. But it is something we should start doing from now. Don't just wait until now. Many of us might be thinking and waiting, when is the month? It's going to be on the 29th of June, so that's when I'm going to start my first juz. Start your juz from now. And if you finish by the time Ramadan comes, then start again. The idea, if you think about the way that we do khatam of Quran, is that, and you look at how it is done in the salah, you realize that when we start to recite the entire Quran during the month of Ramadan, we start with Surah Al-Fatiha, then we move to Surah Al-Baqarah and so forth and so on. And when we come to the end of Surah Al-Nas, do we stop at Surah Al-Nas? No, we don't stop at Surah Al-Nas. We start back again with Surah Al-Baqarah, first part of Surah Al-Baqarah. And the idea of going back again to Surah Al-Baqarah, even though you've just done a khatam of Quran, is to remind you that, it's, when you read Surah Al-Nas, you haven't actually come to an end. It's something which has to be recurring. It's something that you have to do again and again and again. And that is the way we need to be able to connect with the Quran. And what I would suggest for us in this month of Sha'ban, my appeal for us, inshallah, is for us to be able to develop a self-development program in preparation for the month of Ramadan. And that self-development program has to include a number of things. It has to include, one, our engagement with the Quran itself, most importantly, our engagement with the Quran. And especially for us to be able to look back at some of those ayat of the Quran which deals with fasting and the institution of fasting, and the month of Ramadan being the month of the Quran, and other ayat. Certainly we should be able to study the tafsir, which are very much available to us. You can go online now, even kafir.com or tafsir.com, and get so many different tafsir, or explanations of these particular surahs of the Quran. And to be able to start studying these surahs, so that once you begin to study and you begin to understand exactly what it's all about, then you become engaged, becoming almost in a sense infatuated with what is to come and the rewards which is to come. But then you're prepared for it. The next thing is engagement with the Quran, and start your program of recitation of the Quran from now. Continue during the month of Ramadan. So when the month of Ramadan comes, it's not something that you're starting for the first time, but rather which is something which is continued, which is it's already started. I've already started. It's like trying to, just I talked about preparation for an examination. You don't start in a sense engaging in your exam when you just open the paper. It's almost as if mentally all of the answers are there in your mind. It's just a matter of putting the ticks and the boxes if it's a multiple choice, and just writing the answers down. You already know it's there with you, and you're just trying to put the icing on the cake, as they say. And so too it has to be with the month of Ramadan, that it has to start from now. You're trying to build momentum, and you don't want to wait for momentum to start from day one of Ramadan. And that's what's happened to a lot of people. What happens is that they only recognize that Ramadan starts when the first day comes, or suddenly they hear that the moon has been sighted, the month of Ramadan is going to start, and they say, yeah, I need to prepare myself now for it. But have they taken time off from work, for instance? Do they know what they're going to do, let's say, over the last 10 days, if they're going to be engaged in some form of i'tikaf? And then they suddenly say, no, I can't take time off from work because I need 6 weeks notice, or I need this, or I need that, or I didn't think about it before. But now is a chance for you to think about it, even to be able to plan ahead, to be able to see and to look exactly how am I going to spend that entire month of Ramadan. So it's going to be 30 days. How am I going to spend that time from now? What do I want to accomplish? To be able to do that from now. And whatever it is that you want to accomplish, start it from now. If you started from today, it means that more than likely, when the time of Ramadan comes around, you'll be just more prepared to be engaged in it. One of the things I see our sisters, I've lived in some of the communities in Dewsbury and other places. And one of the things that you notice, especially when you go to the cash and carry shop, is that the amount of food which is bought, not in the month of Ramadan, but prior to the month of Ramadan, is tremendous. And a significant amount of cooking goes into trying to cook food and freeze, isn't it? To put into big freezers so that enough stock is there to be able to sustain us during the month of Ramadan. And the whole, month of Sha'ban, instead of being a month of fasting, is almost a month of cooking. And Ramadan, instead of being a month of fasting, is a month of eating, the cooking which has been done in Sha'ban. And, preparing it in one sense, like that, is, some people feel that that's the way that they need to do the cooking part of it, which is. But the same energy that we put into that type of preparation, we don't realize that it's much more than that. The last thing fasting has to do with is eating and drinking, even though it's the number one thing we think about when we think about fasting. Fasting is much more than whether or not you stay away from food and drink. Yes, it fulfills the important, the ritualistic aspects of it. But it's trying to provide an atmosphere, a mental place for you to be able to engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And unless we can come to that sense of realization, we continue to lose the real essence of what Ramadan is all about. So in summary, the things I've spoken about today is that the first thing I talked about was I wanted for us to be able to reflect upon what Ramadan really means to each one of us, that it's much more than just, in a sense, a ceremonial month. It's not just about a ceremonial fulfillment of a duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has much more meaning and significance like that. The second thing I spoke about is a change in our mindset. Because I think this is the biggest hurdle that we have. And each one of us, to change people's mindset in terms of what do they think. What do they think about their faith? Our faith is something which encompasses every single thing that we do. So even if you want to think about Ramadan, or you want to think about preparing for it, to think about fasting, fasting is meant to change not just the environment inside of the mosque, but more so the environment outside of the mosque. The mosque environment will change no matter if we are here or we are not here. We know what is going to take place here. The question is, what about the environment outside of the mosque? The way that the environment at work. Do people notice a difference in terms of who we are? Or is it just that we become much more sulky, much more, our temper rises, much easier, much more easily when we are at work? These are the things which happen, at work, when my colleagues, most of whom are non-Muslims, when they think about us and fasting, they think about us, not being able to engage in food and drink, of course. But they think about us, well, look, he's fasting, and therefore his productivity level is going to drop. It means that what he would normally do, he would not be able to do it again. He would be slower, he might be a little bit more, he might get even more angrier, he's much more short-tempered. That's the way that, or he's been spending his entire night eating and drinking, and getting up early in the morning doing the same, and they're just wondering, how life has changed upside down. He's slept very little during the course of the night, and therefore he's not alert at work. So these are the things, isn't it? This is what others, perceive of what we think, or what they think fasting is all about. Especially since we'll be fasting in, I think, the longest day of the year, this Ramadan. Yeah. Longest day of the year will be this Ramadan. That will be fasting, the longest daylight hours day of the year. Which means that because the hours are so long, it means that, but really, should it be like that? Or is it that we should be looking at trying to perhaps change our work pattern, trying to see what we can do to be able to maximize our performance and work? And if it is that we genuinely feel that, well, look, we can't perform on particular occasions, or we need a break intermittently, why not book leave during that time? Take a couple of days off, as the case may be, so that when we do work, we perform. Or why not work out a schedule with our managers, so our managers can truly understand some of the hardships that we have to engage, so that we can work out a work pattern which will benefit them and benefit us in terms of how we can contribute to our different organizations. So this is something, because Ramadan, and it has to be done in a positive light, because Ramadan is not meant to be some form of handicap for us. Or fasting is not meant to be some sort of handicap for us and for everyone around us, where people look at us as simply as productivity being reduced. But we should be able to show others that productivity it may seem to reduce maybe in the short term, but in the long term it is actually better. And to be able to share with them the experiences of Ramadan and how Ramadan will make you a better person, how you will be able to contribute more. It may be you might decide that, look, if I might need a couple of hours off here and there during the month of Ramadan, but you know what? I am prepared to give an extra 10-20% to my organization after the month of Ramadan, to my work after the month of Ramadan, to be able to show that I'm not just somebody who's trying to take away from something, but I want to be a positive contributor to something. And the same has to go to not just in our workplace, whether you're at school, when I remember when I was a student writing examinations, for some reason most of the examinations took place during the month of Ramadan. It just happened like that. But that was not an excuse for perhaps not performing or not doing it. Almost as if it energizes you. It gives you a sense of more focus. You don't have to worry about eating. You could afford to study. You could afford to study and do it. So you have to there has to be a change in terms of your perception, in terms of how you look at it. If you look at Ramadan as something that is going to handicap you, then it's truly going to do. If you look at it as something that is going to empower you, it can become a true form of empowerment to give you something more and something extra. Because it is building that link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you begin to appreciate that everything comes from Allah and He is the one who is directing whatever takes place, then that is true empowerment and that is true freedom. The next thing is in terms of how it transforms our homes. And this is important. And we will go into more discussion with this inshallah in one of the other sessions. But just to say that as we are beginning to think and look at Ramadan and our preparation for it in a different light, you remember that Islam is not just about us as individuals, but it is us as a collective group. We are a Muslim Ummah. Islam is not defined as the Islam of the individual, but it is the Islam of the collectivity. And every single thing that we do as Muslims, we realize that there is always a collective element. Even when we pray by ourselves, even when we pray by ourselves, we say, Ihdinas sirata mustaqim. Not guide me, but guide us onto the straight path. Which means that, I'm praying by myself, but yet I'm asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, guide us. Which shows that Islam is not just about me, it's about all of us. And as much as we are thinking about ourselves, the best way to empower ourselves and to get ourselves to do things is to be able to ask others to help us and bring others along as well. So if you're at home and you decided that, look, I wanted to study together, why not, or I wanted to memorize, let's say, some Quran during the month of Ramadan, get somebody in the home. It could be a mother, your father, one of your siblings, whoever it is, your wife, your spouse, and to ask them, look, I am doing it, can you pick me up? What would you like to do? It could be the same, it could be less than that, it could be something else, but I will be able to monitor you, you can monitor me, we can do it together. And to be able to also have family circles together, to be able to say, well, look, why not let us study some hadith, but we can do so together. Sure enough, you might want to do a little bit more, and perhaps you may have more time than others, but if you try to do things by yourself, one of the biggest hurdles and one of the short things to our defeat in terms of what we do, are why people do not accomplish things in a continuous manner in their lives, is because there is no support structure at home. It takes a brave man and a great man to be able to do things in such a way that he is growing and everybody else, is static. And very few people can do that. And that in itself is a true cancer, for us as Muslims. What Islam calls for more than anything else is, as we grow, is for everyone else around us to grow as well. And that can only happen when we engage others. We engage others in the mosque. It could be that you have a close friend that prays in the mosque. You see that every time for salah. So if it is that you were memorizing Quran, why can't you say, before we perform our prayer, or maybe just after, can you just ask me a question? How are you going with your memorization if you're memorizing together? For 1 minute, what have you done today, or what have you done so far? Or just ask me, recite it to you, or recite it to me, and vice versa, as the case may be. But having that sense of connection is something important. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's the same level with yourself, it could be somebody else, okay? One of the things that for instance, I live in a place where, for instance, there are few Muslims who live around me, but one of the persons who live just opposite me is a young boy who is he's 12 years old. But at 4 o'clock in the morning, he's there knocking at my door to make sure that I'm up ready to go to the mosque for Salat al-Fajr in the morning. And if he doesn't get up in time, then I'm there knocking at his door to tell him, look, I'm going now. I'm waiting for you outside in the road, as the case may be. So, this type of thing, not because we are old that we can't accept things from somebody young, but it doesn't matter who we are. We can benefit from others. So we have to be able to develop that type of companionship with others who are around us, and who knows. And once others know exactly, because I think a lot of times what happens is that people do not know what we want, what we're thinking about, or what we want to achieve, or what are some of our inner thoughts, or what we want to change in ourselves. We know that we want to change a lot in ourselves, but the only people who know that is ourselves. Nobody else knows that. Nobody else knows that. They might know it because you may say so, I really want to do this, but then the next thing you hear is Assalamu alaikum, and off they go. But nobody wants to stay with you, and that's what we need to do to get closer to. One of the things one of our brothers was telling us just recently on a different point is that he says that, so when you greet a Muslim, the first thing you say Assalamu alaikum, and then he tells you wa alaikum assalam. And then if you know a bit of Arabic, you may say kaifa haluk, or something, or how are you, and he say alhamdulillah. Okay? And that's what you want to hear, isn't it? You want to hear the brother say alhamdulillah. And the moment he says alhamdulillah, it's almost as if you switch off at that point. Okay? Now if you were to say, alhamdulillah brother, all is well, but you know what? I'm going through some difficulties. And then he say, brother, Assalamu alaikum, I have another appointment somewhere else, I have something else to do. It's almost as if we want a point of engagement. But at a certain point, our brotherhood, that's where our brotherhood will end. It's no longer the 6 duties, it's almost as if, duty number 1 has been ticked. Salams have been exchanged. That's it, that's where it ends. But beyond that, what are your difficulties? What are your aspirations? What's happening? What about your family? We don't go to that extra step because I think part of the reason is that we don't want to be able to engage. We're not prepared for it. That's where we feel the brotherhood ends. Because the moment we said, brother, I have a few minutes here. Can you tell me more? We know what is going to come next. And there are some obligations, something that we will have to do. And perhaps we are not really interested in getting involved in that. We just want to have that sort of love-hate relationship. That's where you are, that's where I am, and that's where our boundaries are. So I pray, inshallah, that I've spoken generally about us preparing for the month of Ramadan, mentioning a few specifics. And I've done so deliberately because I just want us to think about the wider picture and the bigger picture. Inshallah, in a couple of weeks' time, when I come back to do the session on some of the actual things that we can do in terms of building a program for the month of Ramadan, I want to cover that in more detail, and I will leave it for them, inshallah. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Riza. I just wish there was more people here to hear the talk today, because mashallah, I've definitely benefited, and hopefully I'll be going home and trying to implement a lot of the advices that have been given. Inshallah, if anybody's got any questions about anything, that Dr. Riza covered or didn't even cover? No? Inshallah, if brothers and sisters, if they can try and make a bit of effort next week, inshallah, try and get more people to start coming back to these halakas, inshallah, more will benefit. Next week we have Dr. Asad Sadiq, who's going to talk about striving for consistency. So it's another practical advice session, inshallah, about how we can become better Muslims, talking further, maybe in more detail about what Dr. Riza has covered, how we become better and do more good, inshallah, within ourselves, within our homes and within our communities, and on a more consistent level. So inshallah, that's next week at 7:15 after Asr. Asr will be changing next week. So inshallah, jazakallah khair for those who are here, who benefited today, and also jazakallah khair to Dr. Riza